good news. All 3 Nanos are here. Michael and I were ripping them around the parking lot last night. They're a lot of fun. So you'll have fun with those. And I encourage everybody to drive them. They're a really cool experience. I want to start by just finishing up the last lecture on the LFC. I can get it. Okay. So yeah, we ran out of time last time, and I stopped where we were at this point, and I was talking about how we made this high performance, low cost product that seemed disruptive in emerging markets, and we got a lot of feedback from people in wealthy markets saying, hey, we want a low cost off-road, robust wheelchair. And it made us see that, hey, there might be a potential for a product, a derivative of the LFC, in wealthy markets. So, we got that feedback, and this is where we started with that new chair. And this is kind of a sexy concept car version of the high-end US LFC that was done by Continuum, the product design firm in West Newton, who partnered with us on this. And this looks awesome. Like it's attractive. It's got some really nice design language of this. We called it like a strong spine. And that's pretty cool if, a lot of your clients may have had spinal injuries. I think this has a really nice message. But look at it from an engineering standpoint. There's a little shock absorber right here. All that's going to do is either bounce the front wheel up and down or bounce the seat up and down. It's not going to give you any shock absorption in your rear wheels, which carry your big weight, right? So this was not engineered whatsoever. It was just a concept sketch. So then we had to figure out how the heck should we engineer this thing for the US market, and what features should it have for that market. So what we did is we ended up doing a bunch of surveys and in focus groups with wheelchair users in developed countries, but talking to them about features and merits of the LFC to figure out what they like, what they didn't like, what should be added. And we did this by going to Abilities Expos, which are wheelchair expositions. We did a SurveyMonkey survey, and then we did actual mini trials with people who ride off-road wheelchairs, but took our developing world wheelchair and brought it to them and got their feedback. So what we learned from doing this, and this is kind of interesting because we were only asking questions about or not only, but we were asking a lot of questions about factors really related to the LFC to try to get a sense of would these people value what the LFC can do? So these are some example questions that we asked about different scenarios that people may encounter. We didn't say anything related to the LFC. We just asked do you ever get stuck, or do you have tough time rolling over rough ground? Is it hard to go up an incline, etc.? And we asked people is this a really frequent occurrence that you experience these things? And we found out, well, yes, actually it is. And this is on a 1 to 5 Likert scale, where 5 is very frequently. So we saw that people, were experiencing situations where they may be able to benefit from the LFC. Then we asked them questions about the different design attributes of the LFC and how many of these would the LFC have to have in the rich world market for them to buy it over other products. So we got a sense of which of these factors would be the most common that people would value and would actually motivate them to buy a US or European version of the LFC. So things like affordability, the easily repairability, compatible with different levels of disability, etc. So we got a sense of the specific functions that really bring a lot of value to people. Yeah?
Did you give them a price range for affordability? Because that's a very relative term, right?
Yes. What did we do? I can't remember exactly how we did this. I think we did give a price range, and we also gave the price range of competing products. Yeah. And so we learned a couple cool things out of this. First, when we asked people about just general aspects of wheelchairs that they would like and prioritize, we're able to see what factors had the greatest priority, and by number of times we heard a response, we were able to weight it from very high, very low. So things like lightweight, quality of life, etc. came out very high initially before prompting about features of the LFC. And then after specifically talking about features of the LFC, some of these priorities shifted higher. And what's cool about this is it showed that some of the factors of the LFC were maybe latent needs that these people weren't initially prioritizing, but then when exposed to them, and this is the definition of latent need, when they were exposed to them, they really valued them. Like the affordability of the LFC, off-road, serviceable. Like serviceable originally I think was really far down. Yeah, serviceable. They were like, oh, what's that matter? But then when you said, hey, you could bring this to your local bike shop and service it, people were like, wow, that's really cool. And so what we saw is that when we compared needs articulated by developing world customers, right, which is in this circle, versus needs articulated by rich world customers, there was a lot overlapping, but there was 9 that could be potentially latent needs that developing world customers had identified, but rich world people, weren't putting forward as like the biggest needs. And then when we prompted them about what the LFC could do, those unidentified needs at first moved into ones that the rich world also prioritized. Yeah.
Can you just describe what you mean by prompting? Was it showing them or telling them about it?
Yeah, we're saying here are features of the LFC. These are things it can do, and so it's serviceable, it's lightweight, it's low cost, etc. So first we asked them questions about like general, needs and stuff, and then we said this is specifically what the LFC can do. And what's cool about this is that we saw that developing world users were able to articulate latent needs that rich world users weren't able to articulate right off, which is pretty cool. And we just submitted a paper on this this week about how developing world people might be able to be used as lead users to identify these latent needs for even rich markets. So that was pretty cool. So from a mechanical engineer's perspective, we took all that feedback and it gave us a really good sense of what we had to incorporate into the US version of the chair. And I brought one today. It's this chair right here on the side. So things like transportability is a really big factor for people in wealthier markets, because this is primarily going to be used as like a recreational device. In the developing world with this chair, it's an all the time everyday chair. But this is more like a mountain bike. So being able to just do something like this is like really valuable. And this took a huge amount of engineering to be able to do quick release wheels with all off the shelf bike parts. You can completely disassemble this and service this at your local bike shop. Actually, this coupling of how it connects back to the drivetrain uses the same wrenches to take apart as you would take apart your pedal bearings of a bicycle. So it does that, you take it off the wheel, you can have quick release seat backs like this, right? And so you can break it down really quickly and put it in your car. Also, it lets us flat pack that chair so we can send it directly to customers. And if and when we go to large scale production, we can fit more in a container, right?
It seems like you went to like larger wheels from the narrower sort of 32 millimeter or whatever up to the wider mountain bike. Is that
A little wider.
recreational?
Yeah, and part of it is aesthetic too. There's also no hand rims on this.
Yeah.
Right? And so we're trying to project this like athletic outdoor image, right? We're really trying to take the disability out of this.
How did the width of the chair change? Is it not
It's-
much of a need to go through a doorway?
Well,
Doorways in America are wider.
yeah, they're wider, and it's not going to be used indoors as much, we expect, right? This is still a prototype, and we're going to learn a lot in the next few months as we do a bit more field trials. We've made 2 of these. We're going to do 5 in the next few weeks that are going to be tested for a while, and then we're going to do the first lot of 100 that'll go through a Kickstarter campaign. Yeah. But what's cool about this too is reverse innovation made this go to that, but this has been designed for much higher volumes of production, so it has a lot fewer components in the frame. And I'll just lift up really quickly so you can see the seat pan. Yeah, so you can see it. This is all made out of sheet metal. This is just like one piece that's like cut out and bent up. And so it's really, really easy to produce in high volume relative to the bottom of this, which was made by cutting and welding a bunch of tubes together, which was appropriate for a small scale workshop like in Guatemala, but it's harder to do at larger scales. So what we're hoping happens is actually reverse innovation, where we can take this platform and bring it back to developing countries and make an even cheaper version of the chair. So I think that's a cool, I like that idea of reverse innovation. So yeah, we had to do the breakdown. Here's a cut view of the hub assembly with the quick release. We had to pack in a bunch of little things in here, but it's all bike parts. It can be standard serviced really easily. Here's showing some loading tests because like US wheelchair users are a lot heavier, so we had to drop off curbs and make sure our axles didn't bend. We actually broke the wheels before we bent the axles, so we had to do all this validation. And I want to end with this point that I think we should think as product designers about what different features of a product mean to different people. And a Kano diagram is a good way that's commonly used to think about that, where some features will be kind of a surprise to people. And so if you include them at all, users are like, wow, that's really cool, I'm really impressed. And Apple is awesome at this, right? They come out with the iPad, does all these things you didn't expect, even if it's not perfect, you're like, wow, that's really cool. And then there's features like, if they don't work well enough, you're like, oh, this product stinks. So imagine the brakes on your car. If they didn't work, you'd be like, oh, this is terrible. You don't really think about unless you're really into sports cars, the performance of the brakes, but the brakes are kind of a common thing. And then, this one-to-one relationship is like, add 50% more to your milk container, you get a bigger benefit, and so there's that one-to-one relationship. So we had to think about this in terms of the LFC, where there's parts like the lever system and the low price that are really going to delight people. They're new in the market. And then there's things like the quick release wheels. These are so common in wheelchairs that if we didn't get this right, people would have been like, that's horrible. But because they work pretty well, people have been like, oh yeah, we'd expect that. It's really cool to see people's reaction, because we as the engineers were thinking like, wow, this is the coolest feature. We actually made quick release wheels and kept the chain on the frame. It was super hard. And we bring it to Abilities Expos and people are like, oh yeah, makes sense. So you got to think about those things and what could turn off a user or like really delight them. So I want to end it there because I want to give plenty of time for Mark. So we have a guest speaker today, Mark Jeunnette. Mark worked for IDEO for many years, the big product design firm. Also worked in Ethiopia for IDE for a number of years. So he's got this great background on ethnographic work. And he's such a good ethnographer that he actually set up me and my girlfriend. We had dinner a few years ago, and I was telling him what I was looking for in a woman, and he figured it out. That's how good a friend he is, too. So if you're in the market for new products or new girlfriends, boyfriends, talk to Mark.
Yeah, talk to me.
Yeah, cool. So you want to switch over?
Let's just go desk VGA.
Let's see if that worked.
Not good enough. Does the technology work?
You want to use this? HDMI?
Yeah, let's just do HDMI.
Cool.
Let's do that. Whoop. Did it just show up? Figures.
I'll move these out of your way.
Okay.
This lecture is tying into reading about Hidden in Plain Sight, reading the book Hidden in Plain Sight. And we're going to have kind of a rundown lecture of all your readings in a few weeks, so we can compare and contrast all that you can learn.
That's HDMI. Anything yet? Okay, that works.
Also, while we're waiting about the nano test drive, if you couldn't make either of the times, make sure you put your name on the last column, which is I can't make.
This is the same one I was on before?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will send out a Google poll to those people in
Let's do
particular,
this.
and so we can find a time that works for everyone. And so we only have to do 1 or 2 more sessions.
Oh, wait, I need it on duplicate, don't I?
And then it also goes for training, so if you can't make any of the trainings.
Give it a second.
You said it worked with VGA a second ago?
Yeah.
As soon as we decide to go that direction, then it's going to flip back.
Fake like you're going to put it in.
Right. Let's see if I can completely confuse my computer by putting in 2 monitors at the same time.
So we'll do this. Yay.
Okay. That is. All right. That was actually just an intro slide. I totally forgot that Amos was talking first. So this is intent. You're not really expected to read through all this, but It answers a little bit of the question about why I'm here. Basically my background, the places that I've worked. But I do really like the quote down at the bottom by Steve Jobs saying creativity is just connecting things, and talking about it, where ideas come from is more about processing what you've seen in your life and what you've seen in the research that you've done as engineers and product designers. So first off, this is just a few pictures of the work that I've done. Let's see if this laser actually works. This is in Ethiopia working on suction-only treadle pumps. This is a rural electricity project in Nepal. These two are both from my master's thesis in Cambodia related to humanitarian demining. If you've got questions about those, feel free to talk to me later. So this session is going to be a whole bunch of questions. And I realize we've got a big group, but I hope people will actually speak up and respond. And along the way, I'll have you try a few exercises. I'll start out talking about fairly high-level concepts, get a little bit into techniques, and then towards the end, we'll do some practice in your teams. So the first question is, what is ethnography? Anybody? I'll let you know there's a technique there's a grad student teaching certificate program that talks about teaching methods and techniques and pedagogy. And one of the things is that if you wait 10 seconds after asking a question, that's usually how long it takes for someone to respond in a class. So I will wait. Go ahead.
It's the study of people and cultures.
Right. So study of human races and cultures. So that's pretty broad, isn't it? So the real question is, what does ethnography really have to do with us as engineers and designers? So what do you think? Let's go with this one. So if you're actually doing ethnography, what are you looking for?
Differences between people and different cultures.
Differences, okay.
From a designer point of view, I would want to know whether something is culturally okay or not okay to do.
Okay, culturally acceptable. Culture. Anybody else?
Cultural preferences.
Preferences. So when you say culture, cultural acceptance, cultural preferences, what do you mean? Throw out examples of cultures. MIT, okay. How else can you, so we're talking about classifications of people, right? That's really what we're studying. Go ahead.
Language and dialect.
Under cultures? Yep. Yep, language. What about parents? You have one over here? Religion, yep. So there are all kinds of lines that we can draw that separate people into different groups. And that's really necessary in order to help us focus our research. If Amos had taken the LFC out and shown it to extreme athletes that work for Red Bull that are fully able, he wouldn't have gotten any valid feedback. So we had to focus down into a particular group. Put broadly, though, the way that I'm talking about ethnography today is, let's see. I guess I don't have a slide for that. What I'm really talking about is inspiration. So in terms of the study of people, there's a social science approach where you're trying to answer questions, you're trying to describe a group or a culture. And that's great, that's valuable. That's great for academic literature. When it comes to product development and design and engineering, the type of ethnography that I have a background in is really looking for inspiration to inform new ideas. So new ideas coming into product design and engineering. This other side of getting feedback and getting data to support decisions is another part of it as well. I'll touch on that briefly, but mostly this talk is going to be about the inspiration side. So why do we actually need to do it? And actually I just answered that question, didn't I? So if we're looking for inspiration, what's the goal of product design? What do you want to do with that?
You want to find the right product for the group that you're designing it for.
Okay, so you want to focus on meeting the needs that you've identified in a particular group. So a couple of times during this talk, I'm going to tell you to take a step back in terms of your view of the situation. So if we take a step back and start asking, why do we actually do product design? You're meeting needs.
You're trying to solve a customer pain point.
Pain points. You're trying to find a way to help a customer do something more safely, faster, or more efficiently. So we can kind of generalize that into saying that we're looking for these problems or hiccups through the process of ethnography. So we'll come back to what that means in a little bit. So where can ethnography actually be used? Or where should you do ethnography? Actually, I take that back. Let me go back to the original question. Where can it be used? In what fields? We've talked about product design a little bit.
Anything that's used by humans,
Some examples?
like water bottles, chairs, video equipment.
What about things that aren't physical?
Marketing.
Marketing?
Services.
Services?
Things around language or literature, like literacy.
In the back?
Policy.
Policy, good.
Health.
Health? Right, so it can be used just about anywhere. Really what ethnography is, it's a way of trying to translate these user needs into, or first identify the user needs and then translate them into something useful to be used in the design process. What about business design? There's another option. So that ties into the questions about where we hope it leads. A number of the slides in this deck are from my time at IDEO. I was in their Munich office for 2.5 years. If any of them are if you don't know what any of the products are in them, let me know. I can explain it. Some of them may be a little bit old because it's been a while since I worked there. So where do we hope that ethnography actually leads, or new ideas lead? Talk about new products, new markets. This was a Swiffer product that came out after the original Swiffer. This is actually called the Carpet Flick. I'm not going to go through all of these, but new brands, new applications for existing materials, new ways of connecting with a customer. So a bank, they have brick and mortar stores, but they're not talking about physical products. They're talking about this service design that you mentioned. New ways of making services tangible. This was pre-smartphone, obviously. This was a project by which you could, Vodafone would actually print out the photos that you took with your phone, pre-iPhone, obviously. You can talk about new combinations of business and technology. Have you given the Kickstart talk yet, Amos?
No.
Have you shown them any pumps?
I think maybe in the first lecture we had a picture of it.
Okay. So this is a deep well pump, also made by Kickstarter, but there's a business development side that went along with this as well, because this is more expensive than the Kickstart moneymaker. They had to rethink the way that they could finance this pump for users in developing countries. So you've probably heard the term design thinking thrown around. It's what, a decade or two old now? But I think it ties in really well with ethnography when we talk about 3 things that need to be solved, or three sides of any product that you need to get right. And as engineers, we're very used to approaching the technical side. If you go over to Sloan, they're very used to approaching from the business side and then thinking about people and technical. For design thinking, or particularly from the ethnography side, we start with people. We talk about, try to identify and get right the desirability of a product. And only after that do we go into the technical and business sides. So how do we do it? Let's take another step back. We already went through talking about the goals of developing a product or service. We talked about what does that mean. Let's see, we already went through this, didn't we? So now getting into the nitty-gritty of how do you actually do ethnographic research. So there are 3 questions to answer, and this is where I want you to all get in your groups. Do we have enough light for people to actually write? Okay. So get together with your group, specify one note taker, and I just want you to list all of the stakeholders for the project that you're working on right now. We'll take about 5 minutes for it, and then we'll come back and talk about it. And where is the fishing reel group? Cool. We need to figure out a time to meet. But